Today, let's walk through the steps of making an oven mitt perfect for your kitchen or perfect to give as gifts at the holidays. Welcome, I do sewing and DIY related content, and today is the first day of Stitchmas and we are making an oven mitt. For this, you are going to need multiple different types of batting as well as some cotton fabric, specifically cotton, so let's get started. So the first step, I am actually using an oven mitt that I already had on hand, and I am just going to be tracing this out on 2 layers of cotton material. So as you can see, it's 2 different layers of fabric, and I'm just going to be tracing this out with about 3/4 of an inch to an inch of seam allowance all the way around. So I'm just using some tailor's chalk and tracing out the shape of the oven mitt, being careful when I get to that thumb portion. And then at the bottom, we do not need to add a seam allowance because we are going to be finishing that off with binding. So once I had that all traced out, I just went through, took my scissors, and I cut all of this out so I could have those 2 layers. So again, this will be the outside of our oven mitt, and I'm just going to go through very carefully, trim this all up. Really pay attention to the thumb portion, as you want to make sure that that is really nice and clean when you are cutting it so that we can get that oven mitt shape. So here is the outside of my oven mitt. Now it is time to work on the batting layers inside. First, you are going to want 2 pieces of some sort of thermal batting. So you can specifically get batting for oven mitts, pot holders. I did a pot holder video and I will include that, but you are going to want 2 layers of this thermal batting that is the same size as your oven mitt. Once that is cut out, you can then start cutting out the other elements of the oven mitt. So you're going to want some sort of lining material. So I'm just using the exact same fabric that I used for the outside, as I had a lot of it on hand. So again, you're going to want 2 layers of the same size of the oven mitt you did for the outside. So now we're going to have 4 pieces of cotton fabric. 2 are for the inside as the lining, and then 2 are for the outside. And then what we need to do now is do the rest of the batting for the inside of the oven mitt. So I'm doing 1 layer of fusible fleece, and I looked online and there are a lot of different recommendations for what should be inside your oven mitt. For this one though, I'm going to be using 1 layer of that thermal batting, 1 layer of the fusible fleece, and then 1 layer of polyester batting, but definitely look into it, determine what's the best for you. There are also some recommendations to only use 100% cotton batting with that thermal layer. So again, just lots of different people have tested this out and done different things. Once you have all of your pieces cut out though, it is time to start assembling your oven mitt. So first step is you're going to take 2 pieces of your cotton, so the outside of the oven mitt, and you're going to be laying them with right sides together and just using quilting clips or pins to pin them up all the way around, as this is going to be the outside of our oven mitt. So now we are just going to put that to the side, and we are now going to focus on the inside of the oven mitt, so that lining. I am using fusible fleece for this, so I need to go and fuse the fleece to the actual lining itself. So I am just going to do this as my first step, is layering the fleece on top of my lining, and then I'm going to go press this out. With that done, it is now time to start layering. So next I am going to add my polyester batting layer on top, and then I am going to be adding my thermal layer as the last layer. So I'm just going to be putting this on, and then I'm going to clip them all together so that I make sure that all 3 of these layers stay in place with the lining of my material. So for mine, it goes the lining, and then I have the fusible fleece, and I have the polyester, and then the thermal. Now I'm just going to create a pattern to quilt onto this so that all of these layers stay together. I ended up going about 1.5 inches up from the bottom and just doing kind of a checkered effect all the way through so that it's really nice and simple and neat. This is the exact same pattern that I did for my pot holder, and there's even more instructions on that, how I did this pattern. But again, this is going to be on the lining of your oven mitt, so you're not going to be seeing it as much, so you could definitely do whatever type of pattern you would like for the inside. I then repeated those lines that I just did horizontally. I just did them vertically to give it a nice and even effect. So now with everything prepped, we can actually take this all to the sewing machine and really begin getting started with sewing. So the first thing I'm going to do is sew up the outside of those 2 layers together. So I'm just going to take a seam all the way around the oven mitt, leaving the bottom portion open, so that straight seam along the bottom. We're just going to leave that open, as that's where our hand's going to be going, so we do not want to sew that across. Once I have this done though, it was then just time to start actually quilting my oven mitt. Now, depending on the pattern you use will depend on how long this is going to take. I had no issue sewing through all of these layers though on my home sewing machine. I just took my time, very carefully just sewed through those lines that I had drawn out with the chalk so that I could get it all to look nice and even, and then you're just going to repeat this for both sides. Once I had both pieces of the lining quilted and everything was together, it was then time to match them with right sides together. So those pieces of the cotton are now facing each other, and I am just going to be using my quilting clips to pin this up very similarly to how I did the outside of the oven mitt. So leaving the bottom portion open, like where your hand will go into, and just taking a seam all the way around, being careful when I get to the thumb portion that I'm really taking my time. As you can see, when I sewing on the curve, I just took my time to go through. This is sped up, but very carefully just sewing all the way around to get all of these layers to connect. Now it was just time to trim up the edges as well as clipping the curves. So since this is a curve, when you get down to where the thumb portion is, you do want to make sure that you are clipping as close to that seam as possible so that you're giving it as much flexibility as you can. Then on the curves, I am just clipping very closely to that seam, and I'm going to be repeating all of these steps for the lining as well, just to make it less bulky and for it to be a little bit more substantial. Then for the outside, I'm going to turn this right side out since this will be the outside of my oven mitt. This is what it currently looks like. I think it looks really good. So now we're going to repeat all of these steps for the lining. As you can see, there is a lot of bulk with this, so you really want to try to trim it down the best that you can so that when you put it inside the outer portion of your oven mitt, it's going to be as smooth as possible. So now it is time to connect the two. So what I'm going to be doing is inserting my lining into the outer portion of my oven mitt. And this really wasn't too bad to do, especially if I put my hand into the lining and then just pushed it in. But this is what my oven mitt looks like, and you can see there's no raw edges. So now we're on to the last step, and that is the binding for our oven mitt. And we just need to create some sort of binding all the way around for the oven mitt itself. Now you can buy binding like this at the store, but I saw a lot of people online saying that that actually uses polyester and it can melt. So it's much better to create your own using some sort of binding bias tape maker, or just folding your fabric multiple times to create this double fold bias tape. And then we will be putting this onto our oven mitt just very carefully, making sure that we are covering the raw edges. So as you can see, I am just folding over my bias tape over that raw edge and then using a quilting clip to pin it in place. So this way I don't have to worry about any of the raw edges as I go along, and it gives it a really nice and clean look. Now when you get to the end, the best way that I saw someone describe this is it's almost like you are merging off the interstate, and then you're going to create a little tail, and then we are going to be clipping this about 3 inches longer than needed. And then we are just going to be putting this in place, so folding it over to give it a nice and neat effect. And then I'm going to be trimming that little extra portion that we did not sew onto the rest of the oven mitt. And this is going to give us a little loop to hang our oven mitt from. And as I get all of this clipped up, I'll show you a little bit better what this specifically looks like. So as you can see, I'm just going to take a straight seam all the way around as close to the binding as I can. And then I'm just going to sew that little loop closed, so that I'm able to get that nice loop to hang everything. So with this all done, it is now time for us to go and take that seam. So as you can see, that binding is covering all those raw edges, and then I have this little loop portion that I would just be sewing closed as well, and then sewing it onto the oven mitt so that it gives me that little loop that I can use for hanging. So now I'm just very carefully going to go through and sew only the one layer at a time of my oven mitt with the binding all the way around. So it's pretty simple to do, you just have to be very slow sewing on the curve. And then once you get to the portion where we are adding the loop, you just sort of want to go at a diagonal so that you're able to attach that loop to the rest of the oven mitt and the binding. This can take a little bit of time, and I will be sure to include some other tutorials just in case you have any issues with it, so you get different angles of the process and you can see how you would attach all this binding on in one step. So at this point, our oven mitt is actually complete. You can see that little loop that we're able to hang everything from. It fits really, really nicely, and I'm excited with how it turned out. I think it's perfect for Christmas time, for decorations, and these could make really great gifts for people, especially if you paired this with a pot holder. Then you would have kind of 2 little kitchen items that you could put as gifts. This again was the first day of Stitchmas, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Now there are 9 more Stitchmas videos coming, so be sure to watch out for those. And if you are interested in learning how to make a pot holder, there is a pattern available on my Etsy store with the link below. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.